Welcome to Breadcrumbs to Blueprints. Today we have with us a very special guest. Her name is Judith Collins. She is an author. She's an intuitive aura reader. She is many things. Let's go through her books. She's written many books. How to See and Read the Human Aura. Here it is here. This is how I discovered Judith. I read her book on the weekend and was blown away, reached out, and here we are now doing an interview. So she's written, I Want to Be Healed, The Colour of Life, Awakening the Miracle of You, Companion Gardening, Working with Mother Nature. She has received an Arts Australian Award for service to the community. Is world renowned. She's been all over the world teaching workshops, doing interviews and lectures. She's also been on Talkback Radio, newspapers, done numerous interviews. She's had a regular column in the Take 5 magazine. She's drawings for celebrities in the Woman's Day magazine, and we used to get that every week in my household. And so much more, even a documentary on self-sufficient lifestyles. So welcome to the show, Judith.
My pleasure.
Wow, I just am blown away by all the strings in your bow.
Well, I'm blown away from and by the website that you have set up on YouTube, your YouTube channel, because I think that you're on the right path, educating the community, having all the different enlightened guests on there, asking them questions so that the average viewer can see how it relates to them in their lives. And I think it's wonderful.
Wow, Judith, thank you so much. That really means so much to me, especially coming from you. Amazing. So I read the book, To See and Read the Human Aura. Now, you wrote this book 30 years ago.
Yeah, 30, 32, 33 years ago. Yes.
Wow. And it is an amazing book. It goes into so much depth that I've not found in any other book.
That's right.
So tell us about your journey. Obviously, I do know some things because I've read your book, but let's share it with the audience. When did this all start for you?
I was born seeing auras. I've seen them all my life. I was very fortunate that my soul chose the family that I did. I'm a premature baby. I was born crippled and deaf. They took 4 years to straighten my legs, so I didn't walk very well before I started school. Had a bung lung and a few other things. So I've spent my life with trial after trial after trial after trial, but that just makes you get better and stronger. And when you have all those trials, you either sink with them or you grow from them. And I was very fortunate because as a little girl learning to talk, I was telling my mother that that's coloured and that's coloured and that's coloured, and my mother, her love of interior design, to interior decorating, she wrote to Derwent, the colour pencil company.
Oh, I love
and
Derwent
she asked them if there was any chance that she could get colours from them, which they sent, so that she could teach me what colours they were that I was seeing. So by the time I was 4 years old, I knew that there was such a colour as cerise and crimson, maroon, beetroot, burgundy, claret. So I knew the shades. There was no such thing as brown. It was fawn. It was doe skin. And it just went on and on.
Yes.
Yeah, and so mushroom, that's right. Mushroom's a beautiful colour in the aura. Anyway, so by the time I got to that, I'd learnt, by the time I was 4 or 5, I'd learnt most of the colours, but I still had a lot more to learn. I had nobody around in those days in the 1950s. There was nobody talking about auras. There were no spiritualists around to consult. My mother, because I picked up information about the average person anywhere, my mother taught me not to talk about it outside the house, but to only talk about it at home so that she could guide me through it. So she enlisted my grandmother, and my grandmother when I went to stay with her for school holidays. And so she just encouraged me, and she loved the fact that she was a keen gardener. We'd go out and I would tell her that there was an insect there, and she'd say, oh, I can't see the insect. And she'd turn the leaf and there was the insect, because I could see the insect's aura shining out from underneath the leaf. So
Okay,
my
is that how
grandmother
it all
was.
started?
Oh yes, but I mean that was my my spiritual quest. I definitely chose when I began to learn the connections of soul which exist within the astral layer of the aura. I started to work out how people were in my life, and people who had supported and nurtured me, and had guided me, and that had supported my back in all my anxiety of not being like anybody else.
Right.
Yes, and so they turned out to be members of my soul family that I incarnated with, turned out to be my ever-loving, darling husband who died 9 months ago, and my other eldest brother, Chris. Not my mother, she's not in my soul family, but my
Really?
grandmother is. And the love of my life, which was my father-in-law, when I met him, we just fell in love with each other. He's a member of the soul family too, but it took me years to discover that's what they were. So what I've done, where you say the book is different, the answer to that is yes. I wrote the book 30 something years ago because I wanted to educate people what an aura really was, not the colors that people talk about. Because when I was teaching people how to see and read the aura, which I've done all around the world, so there's lots of people seeing auras now. What I found is that most people describe an aura as being, my aura is red. Well, there's no such thing. My aura is blue. There is no such thing. My aura is green. There's no such thing. Then I realized what they were doing. When you begin to see auras, you go through the physical layer first, and then through the physical layer are the chakras. And so they are red and orange and yellow, and they're all those colors. And so when people think they're seeing an aura, they're not. They're only seeing the vibration of the chakras coming through the physical layer of the aura. You
Oh, I
don't see
see.
you don't see the pinks and the purples and the mushrooms and the doe skin and the claret,
No.
which is the strongest color in the human aura. You don't find those until you get through the second layer of the etheric layer of the aura. It's a double, it's a twin. The first one absorbs everything, and the second one has all the colors that relate to what your life experience is. And so
Right.
until you get through that layer, you don't get to the colors. So whenever you hear somebody saying, oh, your aura is red and blue, there's no such thing, because the colors in your hands, in your aura, are the most important things. They show what you're learning, your attitude to life, your belief systems, your commitment to people, your talents, what kind of work you're doing, and whether or not you're a positive thinker. So the colors around your hands, you can have something as basic as 5. You might have 16 colors, depending on
Wow.
what you're doing in life. And so the most important color in the human aura is under your feet, because people think that auras change rapidly. They don't. There are layers of the auras that change rapidly, but there is such a thing. The astral layer has somewhere, like, I'm still discovering it, and I've been doing this for 70 years, right? 70
Yeah.
years I've been doing this.
Yes,
um,
amazing.
and I'm still discovering more and more things, because the astral layer's got so many layers to it, right? So many layers within it. And there is a core which I discovered some years ago, and I realized that the colors that are coming from the etheric and the vital, which is the vital layer of the aura, is your life force. So if you hear somebody say their light is dimmed when they're dying,
Mm.
it's the vital layer of the aura has dimmed the light.
Right.
And so it's basically all your energy, your ability to recover from illness, You know, to like you'll see somebody who has cancer and they recover quite quickly and somebody else doesn't. It's because the life force in their vital aura is strong. But get back to my favorite layer of the aura, which is
Yes.
the astral.
Right.
The astral, when you die, it's the astral and one layer, only one layer of the etheric layer of the aura, the multicolored one that has absorbed whether or not you're a cranky person, or whether or not you love children, whether or not you're kind to animals. It records absolutely every aspect, whether how many lies you've ever told in your life, how many white lies you told in your life, how
Wow.
many times you've lost your temper, how many times you've criticized people for taking your car space when you're parking the car. It
Geez.
records everything. It also records how many times you've blown out the candles on your birthday cake.
Goodness
Right?
me. And
It
this
records.
layer,
Yep,
sorry,
that's
sorry. This, sorry,
go on.
sorry. This layer is so you got the physical, and then you got the
Yep.
etheric, and then you've got the
Second layer of the etheric, which records all the things I just said.
gotcha. Second
And
layer. Okay.
that absorbs everything. It doesn't give out energy, it absorbs everything.
I
It's like a
see.
sponge. But the
Wow.
vital layer of the aura gives life to you. It gives out life. It's
Yes.
the only one that just sends out the rays of life. The
Yeah.
other layers all absorb, but the astral aura and one layer, that back layer of the etheric, they're the things that when you die, those they come together. The astral just sucks it up like a vacuum. They come
Aha.
together,
Right.
and they come out through they're connected to the solar plexus, and which I never knew because I never saw it until I watched somebody dying. Lots of my patients, because I did a lot of healing for 15 years, and some of my cancer patients said to me that if I could hold their hand as they were dying, they would allow me to watch the whole process. So I've been able to watch the whole process of the
Wow.
human aura, what happens to it when somebody dies. And it's the same for everyone. And it gets sucked up, like a vacuum cleaner within seconds, but then it hovers for a while. And the life force that you've still got in your body is the vital aura, which is still within and it cocoons you around your body. So that's why they're saying that, the mind is the last to die, because the vital aura is putting all the energy into the living force of the mind. Yeah, it's fascinating.
How
Absolutely fascinating.
fascinating. And the
Yeah.
fact that you can see this and that there was nobody to help you understand this as a child and growing up, and you
No,
through
no, no, no.
experience learnt all this from introspection,
Yes, but
reflection.
also too, because of what I can do, right? What I can do. I've worked with doctors, I've worked with surgeons, I've worked with scientists, I've worked with the police. I've had all this wealth of experience that they all gave me individually, right? I worked with the Western Australian police, I've worked with the New South Wales police, I've worked with the Queensland police, I've worked with the police in England. I've done, all these things. And so it's not that I've done them, it's just I've gone into that arena,
Yes.
and they've shared with me everything that they know and everything that
Yes.
they do. So you get to see other things, like I had a policeman ring me up a couple of years ago, and he said, "Oh, you don't know me. I'm Sergeant of Police." And I said, "Yes." I said, "What can I do for you?" He said, "I don't know what you do." He said, "But people have told me to ring you." He said, "We have a little girl missing." And he said, and I said, "Well, don't tell me anything." I said, "Do you have a picture of her on your file?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, just go and put it on the desk and I'll describe the girl. I'll go through you and describe." I said, "Right, she's got an orange top on. She's got short black hair. She's got brown eyes. And this is her name on the file." He went, "How the hell are you doing that?" Anyway, I
Yeah.
said, "Forget that." I said, "Now, what do you want to know? Do you want to know if she's alive or dead?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Because that information will help us determine where we search and how we search." And I said, "No, she's not here." So I gave them the road and the turn off the road. And then my husband turned the news on the television on that night, put the news on, and they said they'd found the body. So that sometimes, and I just get phone calls from everybody to
Yes.
help out.
Yes.
And working with doctors in a hospital in Victoria was wonderful. And doing university tests of against an X-ray machine and an ultrasound machine, doing research with a university, and being able to say what I see, and then the machines do it, and then finding out that the X-ray doesn't show as much as what I see. That was mind-blowing.
Oh my
It's a
goodness me.
mind-blowing experience.
Mind blowing
Um,
for sure.
yeah. Well, I've
Wow.
been filmed, documented. I've been absolutely everything.
Yeah.
There's a BBC when I was in London. I've been to London many times. They did a documentary on me. SBS has done Compass on the ABC's come out and seen me and done. They would all be in the archives. Compass half a dozen times. SBS half a dozen times. Yeah. So it's been good. But getting back to me as a child,
Yeah.
I found, because of my encouragement and my mother, and my family, and my grandmother,
And how good is that?
it was wonderful. When I started school, it wasn't, because I was
Yeah.
different from everybody else.
Yeah.
And we used to have a cranky nun at school, and everybody used to complain about her in the playground. They'd say, "Oh, she's horrible, she whatever," and I would be saying to everybody, I said, "No, she's got a bad pain, and she has to teach. She just has to teach, and she's got really bad pain."
Mm.
And she died of cancer. I didn't know that was cancer at the time. I was too young to know it. But I knew that she was in pain, so I tolerated her because of her suffering, but nobody else in the class did. They just thought she was cranky and
Yes.
and horrible and a bit cruel. But as I grew up, I mean, the first thing that I discovered that when I first started school, I came home and Mum said to me, "How's school?" And I said, "Everybody tells lies."
Mm.
So, because I'm looking at all the auras of everybody, and everybody's telling lies, because that's how, and my mother explained it to me, that's how people survive. That's a survival technique. And
Okay.
so she got my father and my brothers to come in, and she'd say, "Right, now you have a look at them. Are they all telling lies? Yes. Do they love you? Yes. Do you love them? Yes. Are they horrible? No." Well, there you go. That's how she taught me.
How amazing is your mother? Like, seriously, she's
She's
just
98 years old, and she's in a nursing home, but she's still very bright, and her mind's still bright.
beautiful person. Just
Yeah,
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah.
That's
And
so
she
nice.
says to me, I go to visit her, and she'll say to me, "Could you tell me what's going on with that person over there?" And I go, "No," because I don't. One of the things that I learnt, which my husband, my guardian angel, my husband who's died, he said to me that the way to shield myself, right, was not to openly share information with people. And he was right. And he, at the time he's told me that, he was 21 years old.
So wise. And your story is a real love story. You met him when you were 17, knew
Yeah.
within a few hours that you would marry him, and three or 10 days
And
later,
then
he
10 days
proposed.
later, he asked me to marry him.
How amazing is that? That's
Yep, yep,
beautiful. And
yep,
you were
yep,
married for
yep.
54 years, is that right?
54 years.
54 years. So
Yeah, yeah.
congratulations
But
and
I cared
lovely.
for him. I gave up all my touring, my book writing, my lectures, my everything, to care for him for 22 years. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
beautiful.
Nobody knew what was wrong with him. I could see all different things, but couldn't tie them together with one disease, which I was describing to doctors. Everybody says to me, "Oh, doctors, I'd rather go to a naturopath and whatever," but they
Mm,
forget that doctors are human beings,
mm,
and doctors have their own belief systems, and you can talk to a doctor if he's been reared. Maybe that doctor's been reared as a vegetarian, and so he's got an understanding of food because his parents have ingrained it into him. Maybe that doctor comes from a religion that believes in certain things, but he can't talk about it in his medical profession. But that doesn't mean to say he doesn't believe in it.
That's
So,
true.
I mean, I had 4 doctors around Paul's bed when they were telling me that he was going, and I looked at all of them, and why they were talking to us the way they were talking to us, because my husband was a naturopath, an iridologist, an aromatherapist, a Bowen therapist, a remedial masseur. He was, you name it,
He was a healer.
He was a healer, big time,
Big time. Big time.
And the doctors liked to go to Paul's bed because he'd studied anatomy and physiology, and they could talk to him in the language that they want to talk in, and he understood their language.
Yes. Yeah. How wonderful.
But getting back to me as a child, I became very withdrawn. I didn't make friends at school. I had no friends at school. I stayed by myself. I sat in the playground all my life by myself.
Wow.
Yep, never played with anybody at school. The
That
old
would have been tough.
That
would have been very tough.
No, it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me.
Really?
No, because I could sit back and watch everybody and read them.
Ah.
I could watch everybody playing in the playground, and I was watching them do all these things. But I never felt anybody was connected to me. And when you see auras, you can see friendships there.
Right.
And so I didn't congregate. When I got to high school, it was worse. It was worse. And my parents had troubles with me because I just knew too much about everybody, including them. My poor parents couldn't say, do, think, or act without me knowing. Think about that.
Wow, it's full on.
Think about what it's like to be a parent, rearing children, and you've got somebody who can read you. You're trying to discipline them, and they're reading you.
Yes. And so, at the age of 14, you went hitchhiking, didn't you? You left to clear your mind, I think.
One night, yep. At the age of 14, being at high school at the age of 14, I woke up early one morning, and I just said to myself, I've got to get out of here. I've just got to get out. I've got to stop the world and get off. I just can't stand this. I've got to get away from people. People were driving me mad because I didn't know how to switch this aura vision off. I had nobody to tell me how to do it. Anyway, so I packed a little overnight bag with just changes of underwear and whatever. I thought I was only going to go for days, but I went for 3 weeks. And I took some money that I had saved, pocket money. I used to do odd jobs, and I've always been self-supportive. And I walked 3 kilometres to the railway station, got a train into Sydney, and then said, where am I going to go? And I got a connecting train, and I went up the coast, and then I slept on beaches. And
you're 14 years of age. I can't believe this.
Yep. And then when I got hungry and I didn't want to spend my money because I didn't know how long I'd be away, I knocked on the first time that it ever happened. I thought, I don't want to spend any money. And so I saw some lights on in a cafe, and I knocked on the window. It was about 6:15 in the morning. I knocked on the window, and they went, no, we're not serving. And I just made the stealing hungry, and just said that I would work. So they let me in, and I swept the floors, wiped down all the counters, stacked the bottles in the refrigerator, and they cooked me some eggs and bacon and toast for breakfast in the cafe.
So clever. Your parents must have been worried sick, though, 14 years of age to go off. And did you manage?
My father was.
Yeah.
My father was very worried, but my mother wasn't, because my mother told me years later that she'd calmed my father by saying she could see danger a mile off.
Okay.
because I can read auras a long way away, a long way away.
Yes,
And I
that's
could read an aura by the time I got to most probably, I don't know, 10. I could read an aura as fast as you can read a street sign.
incredible. And did you manage to be able to control that ability through actually going off and,
I
going?
went off. I
Yeah.
went off and realized that I couldn't cope. My whole situation was I couldn't cope in this world, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I went
Gee.
back to school only for a couple of months, and then I came home one afternoon and I said to my parents, I'm not going back. That's all there is. I don't care what happens. I'm not going back. I'm not sitting in the classroom confined by everybody's auras and the teacher in a room. I'm not doing that. I'm not sitting there. And my parents understood.
Mm.
And so I decided to, I stayed off school for a couple of months, did some wonderful things with my mother. We just went places and did things. And then I've always been a hands-on person.
Mhm.
So I was walking one day and I saw a little notice saying that they wanted someone to pump tires of trucks and change their oil, wash down the engine. And I thought, that's me. And so I
Wow,
walked
that's
in
a
and said,
difference.
yeah, I can do this. I can do this.
Okay.
Anyway, so I got the job and my parents were horrified because you're a girl. You're a girl. Yeah. So they said I could keep the job if I did typing at night. And
Okay.
so I did typing at night. And then after I'd done the typing, I realized that what I needed to do is expand my understanding of people from all walks of life. And here I am at 15 saying this to myself. I'm quite amazed at where this intelligence came from at
Yes,
that age. I really am blown away by that, because
absolutely.
I said to myself, right, well, what you've got to do is you've got to try and expose yourself to everything that's out there in a short period of time so that you know how to cope and fit into the world. So I got a job I worked in all different types of things. I worked with solicitors. I worked with a Sydney Stock Exchange. I worked with realtors and brokers. I worked with toy manufacturers. I worked with one of the most fascinating jobs I've ever had was working with customs, with all the shipping containers coming in and everything. And I worked with, and so I just
Oh,
built up a wealth of experience, being exposed to people from all levels of income, all languages, all cultures. So there I was at 17, 16, 17. Paul walks into my life, right?
yeah.
And wow, what do you know? And then that takes that goal down there. And he was my guardian angel in my life. He was what people would call a guardian angel, right?
Yes.
In my life, because one day I don't know how old was I, 26, 27 years old, and I came in and I just said, oh, I can't stand this anymore. And he said to me, well, tell it to stop. Get angry, tell it to stop. So, being melodramatic, I walked out on the back veranda and I just yelled to the universe, stop! And it did. And
Gee.
then all I had to say was, not today. So I can walk out my front door and say, not today, and that turns it off. There.
Oh my goodness. Finally, the answer. Thank goodness.
Yes, but I was 27 years old
27 years. Yeah.
and I had gone through a lot of things that I'd seen and witnessed and whatever.
Mm.
How I was discovered, how old, I don't know how old would I have been when I was discovered. I was discovered by members of a spiritual church in
Ah,
Sydney, just outside of I think they went to the Enmore Spiritualist Church. They were running a meditation circle. They were developing mediumship. And in
yes.
that circle, this is what they've told me. They were picking up a force, an energy force, and they knew what direction it was. So after they'd had several meditations picking up this force, they were trying to explore it through their mediumship. And then they were given some directions. So they decided that on one Sunday, they would get in the car together and they'd drive down to where these coordinations were that the spirit has given them, the mediumship had given them.
Wow.
And they got out of the car,
Yep.
they meditated on the grass, right? Sat on the grass, they meditated and said, let's see if we can tap it in. And they tapped it in and they tapped into mediumship, and
Yes.
the mediumship guided them down. I lived in a rural area on a long road, a kilometre long, with only 2 houses in it, and they came directly to my front door. And they knocked on the front door, and I answered it. I was on my way out to the garden. I'd come in to go to the toilet, and I heard somebody at the front door, and I opened it up, and they just said, we found you. And I said, yeah, you found me. What does that mean? They said, we've been looking for you. We've been looking for you for months. We've been looking for you, and we found you. Well, Paul came walking in the door, and he said, oh, hello. You know, he's friendly. What can you do? And I was about to walk off and do the garden, because we used to call Paul Mr. Have a Chat. Yep. Have a chat. He could talk to anybody. Anyway, so he talked to them, and they said that this gift that she's got,
Yeah.
can do everything, absolutely everything, naturally everything. And Paul said, yes or no. And they came he invited them into the house, and they were sitting down. He yelled out to me. I came back, and they wanted to ask me some questions, and they said they used words that I'd never heard before. I didn't understand etheric, spiritual, any of that language.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
the first question they asked me was, if I could do psychometry. Well, I said, well, what the hell is that? What is it? And they described it, and Paul said, oh, for God's sake, yes, you can do that. That's Paul sitting there. Yes, you can do that. And they said, well, we're wondering if you could do a test on it. And I said, what do you mean a test? Well, if you go into another room and we do something. And I said, oh, you're trying to get me to prove myself to you. And they went, yes, if you don't mind. And Paul said, oh, it could be a lot of fun. Oh, anyway. So I went into the other room.
Yeah.
And they said, you can come in. I said, right, you just put your pen in your pocket. You just put your keys in this. You just did that. She said, I wasn't even hiding anything. I was just putting my hanky back in my bag. So that was that. And then they wanted to know if I could do all these other things. And Paul's going, yes.
Wow,
yes,
he's dubbing you
yes,
in. He's dubbing you in.
Yes. So I ended up doing, what they did is they said to Paul that I had to be brought out into the public, because what I do could help the public, right?
Okay.
Lovely, absolutely lovely people. Really lovely, warm, giving, understanding people. And they had to work out how they were going to get me out the door. And the Mind, Body and Spirit Festival had just started in Sydney. It was its first year, and they knew about it. And they were saying that if Paul could get a stall there. Well, we had our self-sufficiency farm, which was well known all around Australia.
Yes.
So Paul said to me, we were going to get a stall and set up the self-sufficiency. So we did that.
Right.
Because he knew that he couldn't drag me there. I would read it through him, you see. Anyway, so he set up the stall, but he also bought some coloured pencils. He also, at work, he did a blank drawing and then photocopied off hundreds and hundreds of those so I could draw the aura. He did all of that. But this is the funny bit of the story. we went along. I went along with Paul, helped him set up the store, and I said to him, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Oh no," he said, "you walk around, see what else is here." Just as I went past our stall, 2 steps from our stall, a yoga teacher from our town, who was one of my she was one of my clients in my healing practice. She said she was going to do a workshop, and she said it was free. And I said, "I'll go and do it with you." So I went into the workshop, which was 40 minutes long. And when we came out, she said to me, she said, "Look at that line. It's a mile long." She said, "I wonder what they're selling up there." So we walked up to see what they were selling. And they weren't. They were all waiting for me. And Paul had put this sign up, said Judith Collins aura readings, and nobody had ever had that. It was the beginning of everything. It was the beginning of.
Right. How exciting. Yeah.
When we went home that night, Paul realised that he had to make up timing tickets because what happened to me, and it's happened all my life, the doors open at 9 o'clock. By 9:20, I'm booked out till 6 o'clock that night. Every 10 minutes, because I'm doing it every 10 minutes, I'm booked out till 6 o'clock at night by 20 past 9.
This is off the charts crazy.
And I would walk into the show the first day. We'd walk in early. There'd be a queue of people sitting on the ground waiting to get in, waiting for the doors to open. And one woman said to me, she said, "Hello, Judith." And I said, "Yes." She's sitting on the ground. I said, "Yes." She said, "You don't know me." She said, "I've been trying to see you for 3 years." She said, this time I decided to fly up early. I said, "Where do you come from?" And she said, "Bateman's Bay." I went, "Oh." And she said, "I'm always too late." So she said, "I came up the night before. I've stayed up in Sydney, and here I am sitting at the front door." She said, and I said, "How long you been sitting there?" She said, "Since 6 o'clock this morning." And I walked out. I said to Paul, "Have you got any free entry tickets?" And Paul went, "Yes." And I said, "Give it to me." And I gave it to her. I said, "Right, you're the first one in."
Oh, bless. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. She must have been elated.
Well, I had people trying to get in to see me for 3 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
They just couldn't get in
incredible.
because you can't do all of that. And I never did it in private practice because I was doing all the healing. And the
Healing.
healing
Yeah.
was the first thing that I became famous for in the newspapers.